In this video, we continue our discussion on Chapter 5, where in our last video we went over utility. In today's video, we seek to go over a consumer's budget constraint by setting up some preliminaries to then have our discussion on budget constraints. Beginning with our preliminaries, currently we are seeking to develop a framework to explain how consumers make choices, where we need to answer the following questions in terms of how do consumers rank their choices, which we saw was possible via consumer preferences and which we could measure through utility, as well as what are the possible choices available to our consumer, where now our attention is turned in terms of the second question, in terms of what are the possible goods and services available to a consumer with their income. This entails revisiting the budget constraint of a consumer, which recall is the possible combinations of goods and services a consumer can purchase with the prices they face on goods and services and the amount of income that they have. And in terms of determinants, the budget constraint is going to be determined by a consumer's income, which is going to be positively related to the budget constraint, in that if income increases, the amount of options available to the consumer increases and vice versa. And in terms of our second determinant, we have prices, which has an inverse relationship with the budget constraint, in that if the prices on goods and services increase, then that means the options available to our consumer will decrease as a result. So then, to continue this discussion on budget constraints, we'll continue using our example from the prior video, in which we had our consumer that finished their workout and is going to the grocery store for a post-workout meal, in which they have an income process of $9 to purchase ground beef, which has a price point of $3, and brown rice, which has a price point of $1. So then, what can the consumer do with all of their income and the prices they face with this setup? We will relay this information graphically on the right with our budget constraint, brown rice on the vertical, ground beef on the horizontal, and we'll also have our table representation to keep track of this information. The first option that the consumer has at their disposal is they could purchase 0 units of ground beef and 9 units of brown rice, which we could represent with point A, where at point A, the consumer is using all of their income. Brown rice has a price point of $1. They're considering 9 units, so that's $9, and their income process is $9, so they're using all of their income. Alternatively, the consumer can buy a combination of ground beef and brown rice, which you could represent with point B, in which the consumer is considering 1 unit of ground beef and 6 units of brown rice, where once again this is exhausting all of their income. They have $9 in income. Brown rice has a price point of 1, they're considering 6, so that's $6. Ground beef, price point of 3, they're considering 1, that's 3, 6 plus 3, and that gives us 9. Alternatively, another combination would be 2 units of ground beef and 3 units of brown rice, where once again the consumer is using all of their income. 2 times 3 for ground beef giving us 6, 1 times 3 for brown rice giving us 3, 6 plus 3 once again yielding us 9 in terms of income. Lastly, the consumer could consider purchasing 3 units of ground beef and 0 units of brown rice, which you could represent with point D, in which the consumer is once again using all of their income. 3 times 3 yielding us 9, and with an income of 9, the consumer is using all of their income. So then, in terms of income usage, we saw in our prior slide, given the prices that they face and the income that they have, all points on the budget constraint will represent the consumer using all of their income, such as points A, B, C, and D. And as we've seen in our prior discussions then, points below the budget constraint are going to be choices where the consumer is not using all of their income. And we can represent this with points such as E, in which the consumer is considering 1 unit of ground beef and 3 units of brown rice, where with a price point of 3, in terms of ground beef, 1 times 3 gives us 3, and in terms of brown rice, price point of 1, 1 times 3 gives us 3 as well. 3 plus 3, the consumer is using 6 of their $9 in terms of their income process, so they could be purchasing some combination of more brown rice or more ground beef. So then if points on the budget constraint represent fully utilizing consumer income and points below are when the consumer is not using all of their income, points above the budget constraint are going to be choices that the consumer cannot currently afford, where we can see this with point F, in which the consumer is considering 1 unit of ground beef, so times the price point of 3, that gives us $3, and they're considering 9 units of brown rice, where with the price point of 1, that's $9, 9 plus 3, that gives us 12, but the consumer currently has an income process of $9, and so this is not affordable to them, such that some combination of brown rice and ground beef must be given up in order to return to their budget constraint. This then leads us back to opportunity costs, where when the consumer is considering using all of their income given the prices they face, in order to obtain more of another good, some of the alternative good must be given up, which we defined as opportunity costs, that is the benefit lost of Y, to obtain more of X. And in terms of the budget constraint, we can also refer to this as the price ratio, or the price of a good in terms of another good, where in this case the price ratio for ground beef and brown rice is 3, given that the price of brown rice is $3, the price of brown rice is $1, $3 divided by $1 gives us 3, or that to obtain 1 more unit of ground beef, the consumer must give up 3 brown rice. Where we can see this with a rightward movement along our budget constraint, going from point A to B, B to C, and C to D, where we see that the consumer is obtaining more ground beef along the way, but that they are giving up brown rice along the way as well. Where in terms of our table representation, let us consider this going from A to B, B to C, and C to D. From A to B, the consumer is considering going from 0 ground beef to 1 ground beef, but to fully utilize their resource of income, this entails going from 9 brown rice to 6 brown rice, such that the opportunity cost expressed in terms of brown rice is 3. Doing the same from B to C, going from 1 ground beef to 2 ground beef, entails going from 6 brown rice to 3 brown rice, such that once again the opportunity cost is 3 brown rice. And to go from 2 ground beef to 3 ground beef, that is from point C to D, this is going from 3 brown rice to 0 brown rice, where once again the opportunity cost is 3 brown rice, which is precisely the number calculated in terms of the price ratio. Then lastly, let us turn our attention in terms of choice availability. The possible choices available to our consumer can change if the determinants of income or prices change, where we have our budget constraint on the right. And in terms of expansion in consumer choices, the quantity of consumers' choices can increase if their income increases or if both the prices on ground beef or brown rice decrease. And that if income increases, holding prices constant, the consumer is able to afford more goods and services than they could before. Similar analogy, holding income constant, if the prices on ground beef and brown rice decrease, the consumer is able to afford more goods and services than they could before. And how we represent this is with a rightward shift in the budget constraint, going from budget constraint to budget constraint 1 in blue, where we see that there's a greater amount of combinations available to our consumer. And in terms of the second case, we have the consumer's quantity of choices can decrease if consumer income decreases or if both our prices on ground beef and brown rice increase. In that if income decreases, holding the price on goods and services constant, our consumer will be able to afford less goods and services than they could before. And likewise, holding income constant, if the prices on ground beef and brown rice increase, the consumer can afford less than they could before. And we would represent this graphically with a leftward shift in the budget constraint, going from budget constraint to budget constraint 2 in blue, where we see that there is a reduced amount of options available to our consumer compared to our original budget constraint in black.